The rain fell relentlessly over the cobblestone streets of Edinburgh, forming shallow pools that reflected the amber glow of gas lamps. Beneath a starless October sky, Matthias Blackwood moved through the downpour without hurry, his tall figure draped in a black coat that seemed to absorb what little light existed in the night. The cold droplets should have bothered him, yet he felt nothing, a numbness that extended far beyond the physical. 4 centuries he had walked this earth, 400 years of shadows and solitude, of watching empires rise and crumble, of witnessing countless lives flicker and extinguish like candles in the wind. While humanity surged forward with their revolutions and innovations, Matthias remained frozen in time, his heart as still as the moment it had ceased to beat in 1623. The university district was quieter than usual tonight. Most students had sought refuge from the storm in pubs or dormitories, leaving the Gothic architecture of Old Town to stand in majestic emptiness. Matthias preferred it this way. Modern crowds, with their incessant phones and cameras, made existence increasingly complicated for his kind. It was becoming harder to remain a ghost story rather than documented proof. He paused beneath the shelter of an ornate archway, watching water cascade from gargoyles' mouths above. From his pocket, he withdrew a tarnished silver locket, the only possession he had carried through the centuries without fail. The clasp had long since broken, but he never attempted to repair it. Some wounds were meant to remain open. Inside was a small painted portrait, the colors faded but still discernible, a young woman with copper hair and eyes that even the artist's considerable skill had failed to fully capture. Beneath the portrait, engraved in delicate script, Eliza, 1623. "Another year without you," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rainfall. "Another year of searching." The Immortal closed the locket and returned it to his pocket before continuing his walk. The university library would close soon, but the night guard, a middle-aged man named Gerald, who believed Matthias to be a visiting professor, would let him in regardless of the hour. It had taken minimal persuasion to secure this arrangement. After centuries of practice, bending human minds to his will required little more than sustained eye contact and a gentle push of thought. Inside the library's vast archive room, illuminated only by the soft blue glow of his laptop screen, Matthias continued the research that had consumed him for decades. What had begun with dusty parish records and faded family trees had evolved into database searches and digital archives. Technology changed, but his purpose remained constant, finding her. Not Eliza, he had buried her himself in consecrated ground, but her soul, reborn. The ancient texts he had discovered in Budapest in 1788 had given him hope. A vampire's first true love could return to the mortal realm, the soul finding a new vessel. Such a reunion could break his curse, restore his mortality, allow him final peace. Or so he desperately wanted to believe. For centuries, he had followed whispers and hunches, tracking women who bore some resemblance to his Eliza, a certain laugh, a familiar gesture, the exact shade of her copper hair. Each pursuit ended in disappointment. Either the resemblance proved superficial, or more cruelly, he arrived too late, finding only freshly turned earth and grieving families. Matthias rubbed his temples, a purely human gesture that persisted despite its uselessness. The screen before him displayed a series of newspaper articles from various Scottish publications, dating back 15 years. He had been methodically working backward through local history, searching for anything that might trigger recognition. A small headline caught his eye. "Local artists' exhibition captures memories of past lives." The article was brief, mentioning an exhibition in Glasgow by an emerging artist named Catherine Murray, whose paintings reportedly depicted scenes from dreams she believed were memories from previous existences. Included was a grainy photograph of the artist standing beside one of her works. Matthias leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat, a sensation he had not experienced in centuries. The image was poor quality, the woman's features indistinct, but something about her posture, the tilt of her head. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, searching for more information about Catherine Murray. The results were sparse. A few mentions in local arts publications, a dormant social media profile. Her last exhibition had been 14 years ago, after which she seemed to vanish from the public eye. A new search, Catherine Murray, artist, Scotland missing. The first result made his dead heart seem to lurch. Promising young artist Catherine Murray, presumed dead after boat accident 2009. According to the article, Catherine Murray had been sailing off the coast of the Hebrides when a sudden storm struck. The boat had been found capsized, but her body was never recovered. She was 26 at the time of her disappearance, leaving behind a collection of hauntingly prophetic paintings and no immediate family. Matthias sat motionless, staring at the article. Another dead end, another cruel joke of fate. His hand moved instinctively to the locket in his pocket. He was about to close the laptop when a line in the article snagged his attention. Murray's final exhibition, Echoes, was purchased in its entirety by private collector Anton Davenport and is rumoured to be displayed in his remote estate on Isle of Skye. Anton Davenport, the name registered immediately. One of his kind, older even than Matthias, rumoured to be over 7 centuries in age. They had crossed paths occasionally through the centuries, most recently in Vienna in the 1890s. Davenport was eccentric even by vampire standards, obsessed with collecting artifacts related to the supernatural, particularly items connected to reincarnation myths. If Davenport had purchased Catherine's entire exhibition, Matthias closed the laptop and sat in darkness considering his options. Davenport was not known for welcoming visitors, and relations between them had been cordial but distant. Yet this connection could not be coincidence. The decision made itself. By morning, he would be on his way to Skye. The Isle of Skye existed in a perpetual state between reality and myth, its landscapes so dramatic they seemed designed for ancient legends. Jagged mountains rose from mist-shrouded valleys, and the sea crashed against cliffs with primordial fury. It was a fitting home for one of the oldest immortals in existence. Matthias drove the narrow coastal road in a rented car, following directions that had cost him several substantial favours among the shadow-dwelling denizens of Edinburgh. Davenport's estate was not on any map, deliberately obscured from the growing tourist presence on the island. As the road curved around a particularly severe cliff, Matthias caught his first glimpse of Ravencroft Manor. The structure rose from the rocky coastline like a natural formation, dark stone walls and towers that seemed to have erupted from the cliff itself. Gothic spires pierced the low-hanging clouds, and multiple wings sprawled in asymmetrical directions, suggesting centuries of additions by a mind unburdened by architectural convention. A massive iron gate blocked the entrance to a long, winding drive. Matthias stopped the car and approached, expecting some form of supernatural barrier. Instead, he found only an ancient intercom system, incongruously modern against the medieval aesthetic. He pressed the button, and static crackled before a cultured, vaguely European accent responded. "This property's private. Please remove yourself." "Anton," Matthias spoke clearly, knowing vampire hearing would detect his voice perfectly despite the electronic medium. "It's Matthias Blackwood. We met in Vienna at the turn of the last century." A long pause followed, during which only the sound of waves crashing below the cliff could be heard. "Blackwood," the voice finally returned, "the melancholy Englishman with the locket. What brings you to my doorstep after— How long has it been? 130 years. "I seek information about an artist whose work you acquired, Catherine Murray." Another lengthy silence ensued before the gate began to open with a metallic groan. "How very interesting," Davenport's voice mused. "Follow the drive to the main entrance. Mind the ravens. They dislike strangers almost as much as I do." The driveway wound upward for nearly a mile, bordered by ancient yew trees whose branches interlaced overhead, creating a tunnel of shadow. True to Davenport's warning, enormous ravens watched from the trees, their intelligent eyes tracking the car's progress. The manor's entrance was a massive doorway of oak and iron, flanked by stone gargoyles that appeared far more detailed and malevolent than their cathedral counterparts. Before Matthias could knock, the door swung inward, revealing a cavernous entrance hall illuminated by flickering firelight. Anton Davenport stood at the center of the hall. He was tall and gaunt, with sharp features that human eyes might find beautiful were it not for their unsettling perfection. His hair was silver white, worn long and tied back with a black ribbon, and he was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that somehow managed to appear both modern and reminiscent of another century. "Matthias Blackwood," he spoke, his voice carrying the faint traces of countless accents accumulated through centuries. "You look exactly the same." How tiresome immortality is in that respect. Matthias offered a slight bow of his head. "Anton, thank you for receiving me. You mentioned Catherine Murray. An unusual interest for you, is it not? You've always been so singularly fixated on your lost Elizabethan love." The casual reference to Eliza sent a familiar pain through Matthias, but he maintained his composure. "May we speak somewhere more comfortable? I've traveled far." A thin smile crossed Davenport's lips. "Of course, though comfort is relative for our kind, wouldn't you agree? This way." He led Matthias through corridors adorned with artifacts spanning human history. Roman sculptures stood alongside Chinese Ming vases, while Renaissance paintings shared wall space with what appeared to be prehistoric cave art, somehow removed intact from its original location. Davenport's collecting habits clearly extended beyond the supernatural. They entered a vast library where a fire roared in a fireplace large enough to stand in. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, some protected in glass cases, others stacked haphazardly on tables and chairs. The scent of old paper, leather, and wood smoke created an atmosphere both scholarly and primal. "You'll forgive the disarray," Davenport gestured vaguely. "When one has eternity to collect books, organization becomes challenging." Matthias remained standing, his attention drawn to a painting above the fireplace. It depicted a stormy sea at night, with a small boat capsizing among violent waves. The technique was extraordinary. The viewer could almost feel the cold spray, hear the thundering crash of water. But most disturbing was the figure in the boat. A woman with copper hair, her face turned away, reaching toward an unseen presence in the darkness. "Ah," Davenport noted Matthias's gaze. "You recognize her style, or perhaps something more." "This is Catherine Murray's work," Matthias said quietly. "Her final painting, completed the day before her ill-fated sailing excursion. Remarkable foresight, wouldn't you say? Almost as if she knew what awaited her." Davenport moved to a cabinet and removed a crystal decanter containing a dark liquid. "Blood wine? From a willing donor, I assure you. I find consensual feeding produces a much more pleasant vintage." Matthias declined with a gesture. "I'm here about Catherine's paintings. Specifically, her memories of past lives." Davenport poured himself a glass and settled into an ancient leather chair. "You believe she was your Eliza reborn?" It wasn't a question. "I need to see the full collection." "And what will you do if she was?" "Catherine Murray is dead. Her body lost to the sea." Matthias stared at the painting, at the reaching hand of the drowning woman. "Is she?" Davenport's laughter was soft and cold. "Your persistence is remarkable, Matthias. 4 centuries of searching, and still you cling to hope. Most of our kind would have surrendered to cynicism long ago." "The collection, Anton." The older vampire studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well. Follow me to the East Wing. I keep her works in a gallery there. But I warn you, what you seek may bring more pain than resolution." As they walked through the shadowed halls of Ravencroft Manor, Matthias felt a strange sensation growing within him, something he had not experienced in centuries. Anticipation. Either he was approaching another devastating disappointment, or he was about to confirm what he had suspected upon seeing the newspaper photograph. Catherine Murray had been Eliza's soul reborn. And if the latter was true, then the circumstances of her death took on a much darker implication. For the painting above the fireplace had contained a detail only visible to vampire eyes. A pair of pale hands emerging from the dark water, reaching for the drowning woman. Hands that appeared to be pulling her down, not saving her. The gallery occupied the entirety of the East Wing's uppermost floor, a vast open space where ceiling-high windows alternated with display walls. Outside, the Scottish twilight was settling over the rugged landscape, painting the mountains and sea in deepening shades of blue. Inside, carefully positioned lights illuminated dozens of paintings, each more haunting than the last. "My Catherine Murray collection," Anton gestured with aristocratic flourish, complete and undisturbed since her disappearance. Matthias moved slowly through the gallery, each painting pulling him deeper into a world both familiar and alien. Catherine's style was unmistakable. Bold brushstrokes contrasted with meticulously rendered details, creating scenes that seemed to exist between reality and dream. But it was the subject matter that sent cold recognition through his immortal body. A medieval village square with a precise rendering of a forgotten well that Matthias had drunk from in 1503. A forest clearing where he had once sheltered for a decade during the witch hunts. A noble's bedchamber with crimson draperies, the very room where he had first seen Eliza at a court gathering. "Impressive, isn't it?" Anton's voice came from behind him. "I acquired the collection because it depicts moments throughout history with remarkable accuracy, details no modern human could possibly know, places long destroyed, customs forgotten, faces lost to time." Matthias stopped before a smaller painting nearly hidden in a corner. Unlike the others, this was a portrait. A young woman in Elizabethan dress, her copper hair partially concealed beneath a modest cap, her eyes gazing directly at the viewer with an expression of both love and sorrow. His hand moved instinctively to the locket in his pocket. The resemblance was undeniable. "That one," Anton said softly. "She called the woman in the locket. When I inquired about her inspiration, Catherine claimed the face came to her in dreams since childhood. She felt she was painting her own reflection from another time." Matthias could barely speak. "This is her. This is Eliza." "It certainly appears so," Anton agreed, studying Matthias's reaction with clinical interest. "The question remains, what do you intend to do with this confirmation? Catherine Murray is gone." Matthias turned to face the older vampire, his voice low and dangerous. "Is she? The painting above your fireplace suggests otherwise. Those hands in the water, they weren't drowning, they were transforming." Anton's expression remained impassive, but Matthias detected a subtle tensing of his shoulders. "You found Eliza's soul reborn," Matthias continued, advancing a step toward his host. "And you made Catherine into one of us. Where is she, Anton?" For several heartbeats, the only sound was the distant crashing of waves against the cliffs below. Then Anton's thin lips curved into a smile. "Your perception has improved since Vienna," he conceded, "though your tendency toward dramatic conclusions remains intact." He moved to a window, gazing out at the darkening landscape. "Yes, I found Catherine Murray 5 years before her death. Her art was featured in a small Glasgow gallery. The moment I saw her paintings, memories no living human should possess, I knew she was special." "You tracked her," Matthias said, the familiar pain of having missed his chance by mere years cutting through him once again. "I observed her. For years." Anton turned back to face him. "I watched her paint scenes from centuries she couldn't possibly have experienced. I witnessed her wake screaming from nightmares about a plague-ravaged London. I heard her speak Elizabethan phrases in her sleep." He gestured toward the portrait of Eliza. "When she painted this, I knew exactly what she was. a reborn soul with unusually strong connections to her past life, or rather, his eyes fixed on Matthias, to her past death. Matthias felt the truth crystallizing. You realize she was connected to me. I suspected. I researched. I found references to you and your Eliza in my own archives. The resemblance was compelling. And so you staged her death and turned her, Matthias concluded, rage building within him, without consent, without choice. Anton laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. Always so certain of your moral high ground, Matthias. Did I condemn her to eternal night against her will? You assume much. He crossed to a panel on the far wall and pressed his palm against it. The wall silently slid aside, revealing a hidden staircase spiraling downward. Perhaps you should ask her yourself. The staircase descended deep into the cliff upon which the manor was built, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. Torches ignited automatically as they passed, their flames casting elongated shadows against the rough-hewn walls. The air grew cooler, carrying the mineral scent of underground water. Catherine has lived here for 15 years, Anton explained as they descended. At first, she required adjustment time. The transition is never easy, especially for artistic souls. They tend to experience the heightened senses more acutely. 15 years in isolation, Matthias said, disgust evident in his voice, imprisoned beneath your manor. Anton stopped abruptly, turning to face him with unexpected ferocity. Do not presume to judge what you do not understand, young one. Despite his refined appearance, in that moment, the ancient vampire's true nature surfaced, a predator who had survived 7 centuries by being more cunning and more ruthless than his adversaries. Catherine is not imprisoned. She is protected. The world believes her dead, which grants her freedom to explore her new existence without the complications of her human past. She has the entirety of my library at her disposal, unlimited art supplies, and my guidance. Your guidance, Matthias repeated skeptically. And what have you guided her toward exactly? Anton's expression became unreadable. Understanding. Of what she was, of what she is now, and of you, Matthias Blackwood. The staircase ended at a massive iron door set with intricate locks. Anton withdrew an ornate key from his pocket and inserted it into the central mechanism. As the tumblers clicked into place, he paused. I should warn you, she may not be what you expect. Reincarnated souls retain impressions, not complete memories. And 15 years as a vampire changes one considerably. The door swung open, revealing a vast underground chamber that defied Matthias's expectations. Rather than a dungeon or cell, the space resembled an artist's dream. High ceilings with recessed lighting that mimicked natural daylight, walls lined with paintings in various stages of completion, and expansive windows looking out into— Is that the ocean? Matthias asked, momentarily distracted by the impossible view. An ingenious system of mirrors and cameras, Anton explained. It provides real-time views of the sea outside, allowing her to observe sunlight and nature without danger. Catherine found the traditional vampire existence, only emerging at night, too restrictive for her artistic process. The chamber extended into multiple rooms, a library, living quarters, and what appeared to be a music room containing a grand piano. But Matthias barely registered these details. His attention was fixed on the figure standing before an enormous canvas in the center of the main space. She stood with her back to them, copper hair falling loose down her back, wearing a simple white dress splattered with paint. Her posture was so familiar it sent a physical shock through him. The slight tilt of her head, the way her weight rested on one foot while she worked. "Catherine," Anton called softly, "we have a visitor. I believe you've been expecting." She turned, and Matthias felt the world around him fade to insignificance. Her face was Eliza's, the same delicate features, the same determined set of her jaw, but her eyes had changed. Once warm brown, they now shone with the luminescent quality all vampires possessed. amber flecked with gold in the artificial light. "Matthias Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying the soft lilt of a Scottish accent rather than Eliza's English one. "The man from my dreams." She approached with the fluid grace of their kind, studying him with undisguised curiosity. "You're exactly as I've painted you." Anton cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to become acquainted. Catherine, remember what we discussed about emotional control. Matthias, do try not to overwhelm her with 4 centuries of pent-up expectations." With those parting words, the ancient vampire retreated, the iron door closing behind him with a definitive clang. Alone with her, Matthias found himself speechless, a condition he had not experienced since his early decades as a vampire. Up close, the similarities to Eliza were even more pronounced, yet so were the differences. This was not his Eliza brought back to life. This was someone new who carried echoes of his lost love. "You've been looking for me," Catherine said. It wasn't a question. "For centuries." "Yes," he managed, "though I did not know it would be you, specifically." Her lips curved in a small smile. "I've known about you my entire life, even before I understood what the dreams meant." She gestured to the surrounding artwork. "You've been my subject since I first held a paintbrush." Matthias followed her gesture, taking in dozens of canvases he hadn't initially noticed, all depicting him in various periods throughout history. Matthias in Elizabethan dress, standing beneath a willow tree. Matthias in 18th century Paris, moving through a midnight carnival. Matthias in Victorian London, watching a factory burn. Some scenes he recognized from his actual past. Others seemed like alternate versions of his existence. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "These memories, some are accurate, but others are what might have been," she finished. "Anton believes I don't just remember my past life as Eliza. He thinks I've somehow accessed the lives Eliza might have lived had you not entered hers. Alternative paths." She approached one painting that showed Matthias and a copper-haired woman dancing at what appeared to be a 1920s jazz club. "This never happened, did it?" "No," he confirmed. "By the 1920s, I had retreated from human society almost entirely. The Great War had broken something in you." She nodded. "Yes, I've painted that too." The casual way she referenced his past, both real and imagined, was disconcerting. This woman knew him in ways no one had for centuries, yet she remained a stranger. "Anton has told you about me," Matthias said, trying to understand the scope of her knowledge. Catherine laughed softly. "Anton has told me his version of you, a romantic immortal obsessed with finding his lost love, a vampire who clings to humanity despite centuries of disappointment, a potential threat to the careful existence he's built for me." She moved to a small sitting area and gestured for him to join her. As they sat, Matthias noticed the careful distance she maintained between them, not fearful, but cautious. "What Anton doesn't understand," she continued, "is that I've carried knowledge of you since childhood, before he found me, before I could even comprehend what the dreams meant." Her gaze was direct and unsettling in its intensity. "I knew your name before I knew my own." "And Eliza?" Matthias asked, his voice barely audible. "Do you remember being her?" Catherine's expression softened with something like compassion. "Not as you wish me to. I don't remember loving you, Matthias. I remember being loved by you. There's a difference." The distinction cut through him like a silver blade. He had spent centuries chasing a connection that, even if found, would not be reciprocal. Then why paint me? Why create all this? He gestured to the surrounding artwork. "Because the dreams demanded expression. Because your face has haunted me across time." She leaned forward, her supernatural grace making even this simple movement seem ethereal. "And because I needed to understand why fate has bound us together across centuries." "Anton turned you because of your connection to me," Matthias said, the realization settling into cold certainty. "He wanted to study the phenomenon, a vampire's human love reincarnated. It's why he's kept you isolated all these years." Catherine's expression turned enigmatic. Anton has his reasons, as all ancient beings do. But you misunderstand my situation. I'm not his prisoner. Then what are you to him? Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. His protégé, his experiment, perhaps in his way his daughter. She stood in a swift, fluid movement. But never his victim, Matthias. That distinction matters. She crossed to a cabinet and removed a familiar-looking crystal decanter, similar to the one Anton had offered from earlier. Blood wine? I've developed quite a palate for different types over the years. The casual offer, so at odds with the gravity of their conversation, momentarily unbalanced him. This was not the reunion he had imagined countless times over centuries. In his dreams, recognition had always been immediate and mutual, souls finding each other across time. Reality, as it often did, proved more complicated. "You said you've been expecting me," Matthias said, declining the wine with a gesture. "How?" Catherine replaced the decanter and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. 3 months ago, I began painting you in present time. Modern clothes, specific locations in Edinburgh, searching through archives." Her eyes held his. "I knew you were close, getting closer," Anton must have realized. "Of course, he's been preparing for your arrival longer than I have. The question is," she tilted her head in a gesture so reminiscent of Eliza that it physically pained him, "what does he want from our reunion?" The question hung in the air between them, dense with implication. Matthias had been so focused on finding Catherine that he hadn't fully considered Anton's motivations for allowing it to happen. The ancient vampire was notoriously territorial and secretive. That he had permitted Matthias entry to his sanctuary, invited it even, suggested hidden purpose. "He wants something from us," Matthias concluded. "From our connection." Catherine nodded. "Anton is obsessed with ancient vampire lore, particularly the mythology surrounding soul bonds and reincarnation." She moved to a bookshelf and removed a weathered tome bound in what appeared to be human skin. "He's shown me texts that speak of rare cases where a vampire's human love is reborn and then turned. According to legend, such pairs develop unique powers." "What kind of powers?" "Varied, according to the accounts. Some speak of shared consciousness. Others describe the ability to walk in daylight when in physical contact. The most extreme claim—" She hesitated. "What?" Matthias pressed. "That the pair can undo immortality itself, return to human form, together." The possibility struck Matthias like physical force. Humanity restored. The curse of endless existence lifted. Final peace. "You don't believe it," he observed, noting her skeptical expression. "I believe Anton believes it," she countered. "Enough to orchestrate our reunion after carefully preparing the conditions for 15 years. Matthias considered this, centuries of survival instinct rising to the surface. If the legend were true, why would Anton want us to achieve such power? He values his immortality. Catherine closed the book and replaced it carefully. "Perhaps he doesn't want us to succeed. Perhaps he wants to witness our failure. Or perhaps," her voice lowered, "perhaps he needs us to attempt the ritual so he can harness the energy it generates for his own purposes." The air in the underground chamber seemed to grow colder. Matthias had known Anton was dangerous. All ancient vampires were. But the scope of manipulation suggested something more calculated than he had imagined. "We need to leave," Matthias said decisively. "Now, before he returns." Catherine's laughter was unexpected, a bright musical sound at odds with the tension of the moment. "Leave? Matthias, this manor is surrounded by miles of wilderness. The only road is monitored. The cliffs are sheer, and Anton has servants, both human and otherwise, patrolling the grounds." She approached him, close enough now that he could detect the subtle scent of paint and something else. A familiar fragrance that had once clung to Eliza's skin. Lavender. "Besides," she continued, her voice softening, "I'm not certain I want to leave just yet." "He's using you," Matthias insisted. "Using us both." "Undoubtedly. Just as you've used every resource at your disposal over 4 centuries to find me." Her gaze was steady, challenging. "Did you ever consider that I might have my own reasons for wanting this reunion? That I've waited for you as deliberately as you've searched for me?" Before he could respond, a distant bell echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant, its tone seeming to vibrate through the stone walls. Catherine's expression changed instantly, the confidence replaced by something like fear. "He's summoning us. The ritual chamber has been prepared." "What ritual chamber? Catherine, what has he planned?" She moved quickly to a carved wooden chest and removed something wrapped in black velvet. Unwrapping it revealed a silver dagger with intricate engravings along the blade. "Anton has studied soul bond rituals for centuries," she explained, concealing the dagger within the folds of her dress. "He believes the autumn equinox, tonight, combined with a waning moon, creates ideal conditions for attempting to reverse immortality." "And you agreed to this?" Matthias asked incredulously. Her eyes met his, and for the first time he glimpsed something of Eliza in their depths, a determined resolve that transcended physical resemblance. "I agreed to participate in his ritual," she said carefully. "But Anton doesn't know everything about soul bonds. There are texts he hasn't seen, manuscripts I've discovered hidden within his own collection, ancient knowledge even he has overlooked." The bell sounded again, more insistent. "We need to go," she said, moving toward the iron door, which was now slowly opening by some unseen mechanism. "Follow my lead. Oh, say nothing of what I've told you." As they ascended the spiral staircase, Catherine whispered without turning, "Whatever happens in the ritual chamber, remember this: the blood of the Maker can unmake. Anton believes he's the puppet master, but every puppet has strings that can be severed." The cryptic warning lingered in Matthias's mind as they emerged into the gallery, where Anton waited with an expression of benevolent anticipation that did nothing to mask the predatory gleam in his ancient eyes. "Ah, there you are," the older vampire said. "I trust your reunion was enlightening." Catherine stepped forward, her posture suddenly deferential. "Yes, master. Everything as you predicted." Anton's pleased smile never reached his eyes. "Excellent, then we are ready to proceed. The stars are aligned, the elements prepared." He extended his hands to them both. "Come, tonight we shall either make vampire history or become it." As they followed Anton deeper into the labyrinthine manor, Matthias caught Catherine's eye. In that brief glance, he saw calculation, determination, and something else. A fierce intelligence that had nothing to do with her past life as Eliza and everything to do with who she had become in this one. Whatever game Anton was playing, Catherine had been developing her own countermoves for 15 years. The question that troubled Matthias as they descended toward the ritual chamber was whether either of them truly understood the forces they were about to unleash, and whether any of them would survive the night that followed. The ritual chamber lay at the heart of Ravencroft Manor, deep beneath the foundations where the building merged with the ancient cliff face. As they descended the final staircase, hewn directly from living stone, Matthias felt the weight of the earth above, pressing down, a physical manifestation of the mounting tension. The chamber itself was a perfect circle, its domed ceiling disappearing into shadow despite the dozens of black candles that lined the perimeter. At the center stood a raised stone altar, its surface carved with symbols Matthias recognized from various occult traditions spanning millennia. Some were familiar, Egyptian hieroglyphs intertwined with Norse runes, while others appeared older, more primitive, their meanings lost to time. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Anton gestured proudly as they entered. "This chamber predates the manor by thousands of years. Neolithic humans worshipped here long before recorded history. They understood instinctively that the veil between worlds is thinner in this place." Catherine moved with practiced familiarity toward a series of shallow basins positioned at cardinal points around the altar. Each contained different elements, one filled with seawater, another with rich soil, the third with smouldering herbs, and the fourth empty, waiting. The fourth basin requires air charged by storm, she explained, noticing Matthias's questioning glance. Anton has an ingenious system to channel lightning from above. Indeed, the ancient vampire approached a mechanism on the wall that resembled a primitive switchboard. The metal rods on the manor's highest towers attract lightning during storms, conducting it down through the rock via copper channels. When released into the chamber, it creates air charged with primordial energy. He manipulated several dials, and a low humming filled the chamber as stored electrical energy flowed into the fourth basin. A shimmering distortion appeared above it, air made visible by powerful electromagnetic forces. "The elements are balanced," Anton announced with satisfaction. "Now we require only the principal components." From an ornate chest, he removed 3 chalices made of hammered silver. "Blood is the conduit of the soul," he intoned, his voice taking on a ceremonial quality. "Through blood, immortality was granted. Through blood, it may be relinquished." Catherine took her position beside the altar, her white dress gleaming in the candlelight. To Matthias, she appeared both vulnerable and dangerous, a contradiction embodied. The concealed dagger remained hidden in the folds of her garment, but her fingers occasionally brushed against it, a gesture so subtle that only his heightened senses could detect it. "The ritual requires blood, freely given," Anton continued, placing the chalices on the altar. "From the seeker of mortality," he nodded to Matthias. "From the reborn soul," his gaze shifted to Catherine, "and from the elder who guides the passage." Matthias approached cautiously. "What exactly will this ritual do, Anton?" The ancient vampire's smile was enigmatic. "If the legends are true, it will restore your humanity, both of you. Your immortal essence will transfer to the elements, leaving you mortal once more, aging, vulnerable, but fully human." "And if the legends are false," Matthias pressed. "Then nothing happens," Anton shrugged elaborately. "Or perhaps something unexpected. Magic, especially blood magic, is notoriously unpredictable." Catherine stepped forward. "You've studied this ritual for centuries, Master. You must have theories about its potential side effects." Anton's eyes narrowed slightly at her questioning tone. "There are accounts of failed attempts, naturally. Some resulted in the participants being reduced to ash. Others speak of souls being torn from bodies, existing in eternal torment, neither living nor dead." He waved a dismissive hand. "But these were clearly performed incorrectly." "Clearly," Matthias echoed dryly. Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral. "And your role in all this, Master? You guide the passage, but to what end for yourself?" For the briefest moment, something ancient and terrible flickered across Anton's face, a glimpse of the predator beneath the aristocratic veneer. Then it was gone, replaced by benevolent patience. "My dear Catherine, after 7 centuries of existence, one develops an appreciation for witnessing historic moments. The reversal of vampirism has never been documented successfully. I merely wish to observe and perhaps publish my findings for our kind's historical records." The explanation sounded reasonable, yet Matthias detected the subtle shift in Anton's scent that indicated deception. Vampires could lie convincingly to humans, but deceiving their own kind required greater skill. And Anton, despite his age, could not completely mask the chemical changes that accompanied falsehood. "Shall we begin?" Anton didn't wait for agreement before producing an ornate silver dagger, nearly identical to the one Catherine had concealed. The blood must be drawn simultaneously as the equinox reaches its precise moment of balance. He consulted an ancient timepiece. "We have exactly 7 minutes. Take your positions." Catherine moved to stand opposite Matthias across the altar, their eyes meeting briefly over the ceremonial implements. In that glance, Matthias saw determination and warning. "Stay alert, be ready." Anton positioned himself at the head of the altar, completing their triangle. "The ritual requires an invocation in the original tongue," he explained, withdrawing a small, bound manuscript from his jacket. "I believe I am the only living being who can still pronounce these words correctly." He began to read from the text, his voice transforming as he spoke. The language was unlike anything Matthias had ever heard. Not Latin or Greek or any ancient human tongue, but something older, more primal. The sounds seemed to bypass his ears entirely, resonating directly in his mind with uncomfortable intensity. The air in the chamber grew heavy, the candle flames stretching unnaturally tall before dimming to bare flickers. The elements in the 4 basins began to react. Water churning, earth shifting, fire flaring, and the electrified air swirling visibly. "The veil thins," Anton intoned between passages from the manuscript. "We stand at the crossroads of mortality and eternity." As the ancient vampire continued the invocation, Matthias noticed something alarming. The symbols carved into the altar were beginning to glow with a dull red light, as if the stone itself were heating from within. More disturbing still, the light seemed to form patterns between the 3 of them, tendrils of energy stretching from Anton toward both Matthias and Catherine. "1 minute remaining," Anton announced, setting aside the manuscript. "Prepare your blades." He raised his silver dagger, and Catherine and Matthias followed suit, Catherine now openly wielding the weapon she had concealed. If Anton noticed the matching dagger, he gave no indication, his attention fixed on the timepiece, counting down the final seconds. "When I give the signal, each must slice the palm and allow the blood to flow into your chalice," he instructed. "Do not stop the flow until I indicate. The amount required is substantial." Matthias tensed, centuries of survival instinct screaming warnings. Vampires could lose blood without permanent damage, but excessive blood loss weakened them significantly, making them vulnerable. If this was a trap— "Now!" Anton commanded. 3 blades flashed simultaneously in the candlelight. Matthias felt the sharp sting as the silver, one of the few metals that could easily cut vampire flesh, sliced across his palm. Dark blood, thicker and darker than human blood, welled from the wound and dripped into the chalice below. The moment their blood touched the silver vessels, the chamber's atmosphere changed dramatically. The air grew charged with palpable energy, pressing against them from all sides. The glowing symbols on the altar intensified, pulsing in rhythm with an unheard heartbeat. Anton began chanting again, his eyes now closed in concentration. As the blood continued to flow, Matthias felt an unsettling sensation, as if something essential was being drawn out of him, beyond just the physical blood. He glanced at Catherine and saw her face contorted in similar discomfort, though she maintained her position. The tendrils of energy emanating from the altar grew more pronounced, forming a complex web between the 3 vampires. But Matthias now observed something Anton seemed unaware of. While energy flowed from both him and Catherine toward Anton, nothing flowed back. The ritual was not balanced. It was extractive. Catherine's eyes met his, confirming his suspicion. This was never about restoring their humanity. Whatever power the soul bond generated was being channeled directly to Anton. "Continue the bloodletting," Anton commanded, his voice strained but triumphant. "The transformation begins." Indeed, something was happening. The blood in the chalices had begun to change, emitting a subtle luminescence that illuminated their faces from below. Matthias felt increasingly weakened, his vision blurring at the edges. Across from him, Catherine swayed slightly, but remained upright through obvious effort. The blood of the bonded souls combines with the blood of the elder. Anton's voice rose over the growing supernatural wind that circulated through the chamber. The power of 3 becomes 1. With a sudden violent motion, he seized both their chalices and poured their blood into his own vessel. The combined blood flashed with blinding brilliance, causing Matthias to shield his eyes momentarily. When he looked again, Anton was drinking from the combined chalice, his eyes glowing with an internal fire that had nothing to do with the ritual's ambient light. As the ancient vampire consumed their blood, the energy tendrils connecting them grew more substantive, pulsing with stolen vitality. "What are you doing?" Matthias demanded, his voice weaker than intended. "This isn't the ritual you described." Anton lowered the chalice, blood staining his lips black in the strange light. His smile was terrible to behold, no longer bothering to mask the predator within. "Did you really believe I would help you become human?" He laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally around the chamber. "The soul bond doesn't reverse immortality. It amplifies it. When harnessed correctly, it creates power beyond imagination." Catherine stepped back from the altar, her expression a complex mixture of fear and grim determination. "You never intended to help us." "On the contrary, my dear," Anton replied, setting down the now empty chalice. "You're helping me. For centuries I've searched for a perfectly matched pair, a vampire and his reincarnated love. Do you know how rare such a combination is? Hundreds of vampires seek their reborn loves. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 finds them. And among those, only a handful discover them in time to transform them." He spread his arms wide, and the energy tendrils responded, thickening and brightening. The legends were quite real, but mistranslated. The ritual doesn't reverse vampirism. It allows one vampire to absorb the combined power of a soul-bonded pair. Matthias felt the continuing drain of his strength, as if his very essence was being siphoned away. "You're killing us." "Not killing, transforming," Anton corrected with academic precision. "Your individual consciousnesses will fade, but your power will live on, within me." Catherine caught Matthias's eye, a silent message passing between them. Despite their brief acquaintance in this lifetime, something deeper connected them, something Anton had not anticipated. Without words, Matthias understood her plan. "The blood of the Maker can unmake," she had said. The meaning now became clear. "You've made a fundamental miscalculation, Anton," Catherine said, her voice stronger than her weakened state should have allowed. "You assumed I would enter this ritual unprepared." Anton's confident expression faltered slightly. "What are you babbling about, child? The ritual is already working. Feel your strength ebbing, your consciousness fading. There's nothing you can do now." "There's always something," she countered, and with unexpected swiftness she slashed her dagger across her own forearm, a much deeper cut than the ritual had required. Her blood sprayed across the altar, striking the symbols with hissing intensity. Where it touched the glowing engravings, the light changed from red to blue, spreading outward like frost across a window pane. "No!" Anton lurched forward, but Matthias was already moving. Summoning his remaining strength, he seized the ancient vampire's arm, preventing him from interfering with whatever Catherine had initiated. "What have you done?" Anton demanded, struggling against Matthias's grip with surprising difficulty. The ritual had evidently transferred some of their strength to him, but not as much as he had expected. Catherine's smile was fierce through her pain. "While you kept me in your underground sanctuary for 15 years, I had access to your entire occult library. Did you really think I'd spend all that time just painting? I found the original texts, not your convenient translations." She pressed her bleeding arm against a specific symbol on the altar. "This isn't the symbol of transference you taught me. It's the symbol of reflection." The change was immediate and violent. The energy tendrils connecting them suddenly reversed direction, flowing back toward Matthias and Catherine with such force that Anton was driven to his knees. "Impossible!" he gasped, his face contorting as his stolen energy began to drain away. "The original text was destroyed centuries ago." "Not destroyed," Catherine corrected, her strength visibly returning as the flow continued. "Hidden by vampires who feared exactly what you're attempting." Matthias felt his power rushing back, accompanied by something else, memories that were not his own. Anton's memories, bleeding into his consciousness as the connection between them remained open, but reversed. He saw flashes of Anton's centuries of existence, battles long forgotten by history, secret councils of ancient vampires, and most recently, the moment Anton first discovered Catherine's paintings and recognized their significance. "You've been planning this for decades," Matthias realized aloud. "Long before you found Catherine, you've been searching for matched pairs like us." "Of course I have," Anton snarled, struggling to regain his footing as the ritual continued to drain him. "Immortality becomes meaningless without power to accompany it. I've watched younger vampires gain prominence while I fade into obscurity. The modern world has no place for those who refuse to adapt." "So you'd sacrifice us to regain relevance?" Catherine asked, disgust evident in her voice. "I'd harness what you waste," Anton retorted. "Your connection could reshape vampire society, yet you'd throw it away for the chance to become human again. Such pathetic nostalgia." The chamber began to shake, dust and small stones falling from the domed ceiling. The reversed ritual was creating instability in the ancient structure, the competing magical forces threatening the very foundations. "We need to end this," Matthias warned Catherine. "The entire chamber could collapse." She nodded, pressing her palm against another symbol on the altar. "There's only one way to close the connection safely." Before she could complete whatever action she intended, Anton made a desperate lunge across the altar, knocking her backward. "I will not be defeated by my own creation," he roared, his aristocratic veneer completely gone, replaced by feral rage. He seized her by the throat, fangs fully extended. "If I cannot have your power, I'll take your existence." Matthias moved with speed, born of renewed strength and desperate purpose, driving his silver dagger deep into Anton's back. The ancient vampire released Catherine with a howl of pain and outrage. "You cannot kill me with mere silver," he spat, rounding on Matthias. "I am 7 centuries your elder." "I don't need to kill you," Matthias replied calmly. "I only needed to distract you." Behind Anton, Catherine had regained her position at the altar. With deliberate precision, she pressed her bleeding palm against 3 symbols in quick succession, speaking words in the same ancient language Anton had used earlier. The effect was instantaneous. The energy tendrils connecting the 3 vampires suddenly contracted, condensing into a blinding sphere above the altar. For one suspended moment, the light illuminated the entire chamber with unnatural clarity, revealing ancient paintings on the ceiling depicting the very ritual they were performing. Then the sphere collapsed inward with devastating force. A shock-wave of energy exploded outward, throwing all 3 vampires against the chamber walls. The candles extinguished simultaneously, plunging the space into total darkness. In the pitch blackness, Matthias could hear falling debris as the chamber began to collapse more rapidly. He called out, "Catherine! Here!" Her voice came from somewhere to his left. "We have to get out, now!" "Anton!" Matthias could no longer sense the ancient vampire's presence. "Gone!" Catherine's voice was closer now, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Not destroyed, but banished. The ritual reversed his attempt to absorb our power, but it did something else too, something unexpected." Her hand in his felt unusually warm. Vampire flesh was typically cool to the touch. Before he could question this, a massive section of ceiling crashed down where the altar had stood. "Questions later," she urged, pulling him toward where the exit should be. The entire cliff face could be destabilized. They navigated by touch and memory through the collapsing passages, the sounds of destruction growing louder behind them. As they climbed upward, Matthias noticed something alarming. He was breathless, his lungs burning with exertion. Vampires didn't need to breathe except to speak. They certainly didn't experience respiratory distress. They emerged into the gallery just as the floor beneath them gave a sickening lurch. Paintings fell from walls as the manor's foundations shifted with the collapsing chambers below. Through the massive windows, they could see the night sky had cleared. stars visible above the turbulent sea. "The east wing is going first," Catherine observed, pulling him toward the main entrance. "We have minutes at most." As they ran through the opulent corridors of Ravencroft Manor, Matthias became increasingly aware of disturbing physical sensations. His heart pounding in his chest, sweat on his brow, muscles burning with fatigue. These were human reactions, impossible for his kind. They burst through the main doors into the cool night air just as a thunderous roar announced the collapse of the east wing. The ground beneath their feet trembled as sections of the ancient manor began to slide toward the cliff edge. "My car!" Matthias gasped, pointing toward where he had parked at the end of the drive. "It's too close to the house," Catherine countered, dragging him toward a small outbuilding some distance from the main structure. "There's another vehicle here." As they reached safer ground, Matthias pulled her to a stop beneath the moonlight, needing to confirm what he already suspected. In the silvery illumination, he could see her clearly, and she was transformed. Her skin had lost the marble-like perfection of vampiric flesh, taking on a warmer, more human tone. Her eyes no longer held the supernatural luminescence of their kind. Most telling of all, when he pressed his fingers to her wrist, he felt what should have been impossible. A pulse. "Catherine," he whispered, "you're human." She touched his face with wonder, her fingers tracing the changes there. "So are you." Behind them, Ravencroft Manor gave a final, catastrophic groan before large sections slid into the sea, centuries of vampire history disappearing into the depths. The ground continued to shake beneath their feet, reminding them their escape was far from complete. "How is this possible?" Matthias demanded, even as they resumed their flight toward the outbuilding. Catherine's laugh was breathless, genuinely breathless. Anton was right about one thing: the ritual was mistranslated, but not in the way he thought. She pushed open the outbuilding door, revealing an expensive, modern SUV. "The soul bond doesn't transfer immortality or reverse it through some external process." She located keys hanging on a nearby hook and tossed them to Matthias. "The ritual creates a choice." As they climbed into the vehicle and Matthias started the engine, the implications of what had happened began to crystallize in his mind. They had become human again. The impossible dream he had chased for centuries had somehow been fulfilled. Yet Anton had vanished rather than died, and the manor's destruction felt too convenient, too complete. They sped down the winding drive as more of the estate collapsed behind them. When they reached the main gate, it stood open, another detail that struck Matthias as troubling rather than fortunate. Only when they had put several miles between themselves and the ruined estate did Matthias dare to speak again. "You said the ritual creates a choice. What exactly happened back there, Catherine?" She stared out at the road ahead, her newly human features illuminated by the dashboard lights. "The true purpose of the ritual is balance, not power. When Anton tried to take everything for himself, he created an imbalance. When I reversed the flow, it created a different kind of imbalance." Her eyes met his, filled with complexity that transcended her physical transformation. The only way to restore balance was for something fundamental to change. Either all three of us would remain vampires, sharing power equally, or two would become human, while the third absorbed all the immortality. The revelation struck Matthias with terrible clarity. "Anton," she nodded grimly, "wherever he is now, he carries not just his own immortality, but ours as well. The ritual didn't destroy him, it transformed him into something more, and we're completely human." The concept was still too extraordinary to fully comprehend. 4 centuries of immortality gone in a single night. "As human as we ever were," she confirmed. "Mortal, vulnerable." A small smile touched her lips. "Free." As they drove through the Scottish night, now feeling the cold and fatigue that immortality had kept at bay for so long, Matthias realized the true magnitude of what had occurred. They had escaped Anton and regained their humanity. But at what cost? An ancient, power-hungry vampire had vanished with amplified abilities and every reason to seek revenge. "He'll come for us," Matthias said quietly. "Once he adjusts to whatever he's become." Catherine's expression remained determined, even as exhaustion, true human exhaustion, began to show on her features. "Then we'll be ready. I didn't spend 15 years studying just the ritual. I learned everything Anton knew about vampire weaknesses, hiding places, and old alliances." She reached across and took his hand, warm now, pulse beating against pulse. "Besides, we have something he doesn't." "What's that?" Her smile contained echoes of Eliza, yet was entirely her own. "Each other, and 4 centuries of motivation." As dawn approached, the first sunrise Matthias would witness without pain in 400 years, they drove onward through the highland landscape. Behind them lay the ruins of Ravencroft Manor, slowly sliding into the sea. Before them stretched the uncertain promise of reclaimed humanity. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, something that had once been Anton Davenport was awakening to terrible new power. And the knowledge that his carefully orchestrated ritual had succeeded in ways he had never intended. The game had not ended, it had merely changed its rules. The journey back to Edinburgh was a revelation in physicality. Every pothole in the road reverberated through Matthias's newly sensitized body. His muscles ached. His eyelids grew heavy as sunrise painted the highland landscape in colors he had not truly seen in 4 centuries. The simple act of breathing, necessary now, not optional, filled him with wonder and terror in equal measure. "We should stop soon," Catherine said, noticing his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. "You haven't been human in a long time. Exhaustion affects judgment." "I'm fine," he insisted automatically, then caught himself. The Immortal's pride, the assumption of limitless endurance, was no longer his reality. "Actually, you're right. There's a small village ahead." They found a weathered inn with peeling paint and windows that glowed with warm invitation. The elderly proprietor raised an eyebrow at their disheveled appearance, clothes torn and stained with blood and dirt, but Scottish discretion prevailed. She asked no questions beyond whether they preferred 1 room or 2. "1," Catherine answered before Matthias could speak. "With 2 beds," she added, catching his surprised glance. Their room was small but clean, with a window overlooking the misty hills. When the door closed behind them, leaving them truly alone for the first time since their transformation, the weight of their new reality settled upon them. "We should clean up," Catherine said practically. "I'll go first, if you don't mind." As the bathroom door closed, Matthias sank onto the edge of the bed, his body surrendering to the exhaustion he'd been fighting. His hand moved automatically to his chest, where he felt the steady rhythm that had been absent for centuries. A heartbeat, his heartbeat. When Catherine emerged wrapped in a towel, hair damp and skin flushed from hot water, Matthias found himself unprepared for the visceral reaction of his human body. As a vampire, he had experienced desire as a distant, controlled thing, an echo of human passion filtered through immortal detachment. This was different, immediate, overwhelming. He rushed to the bathroom, muttering something incoherent about his turn. Under the hot spray of water, Matthias confronted the paradox of his situation. He had searched for Catherine, for Eliza reborn, for centuries, driven by the hope that finding her would restore his humanity. Now both desires had been fulfilled in ways he never anticipated, yet new complications arose. This woman was not Eliza, despite carrying echoes of her soul. And his restored humanity brought with it all the messy, uncontrollable emotions he had forgotten. When he returned to the bedroom, Catherine had dressed in a nightshirt provided by the inn and sat cross-legged on one bed, her expression contemplative. "We need to talk about Anton," she said without preamble. Matthias nodded, taking a seat on the opposite bed. "What exactly do you think happened to him? The ritual created a trinity of power, you, me, and Anton. When the balance was disrupted, someone had to absorb the excess energy. Anton essentially became a vessel for 3 immortalities, making him 3 times as powerful, Matthias concluded grimly. Perhaps more. The texts I studied suggested the power grows exponentially, not linearly. She ran a hand through her damp hair. But power has costs. Anton's body will need time to adapt. He's likely in a state similar to torpor while the transformation completes. How long do we have? Days, maybe weeks. Her eyes met his. Not long enough. Matthias absorbed this information. We need allies. Catherine laughed softly. Your vampire allies won't help 2 humans, regardless of who we once were. And my connections were all through Anton. Not all of my connections were vampires, Matthias replied. In my centuries, I've known hunters, witches, scholars of the occult. Some of their descendants still maintain the old knowledge. Can you trust them? Trust is relative when dealing with the supernatural, he said, but necessity creates strange alliances. They talked long into the night, comparing knowledge and planning strategies, until Catherine's words began to slur with exhaustion. Human needs, sleep, food, warmth, asserted themselves with undeniable urgency. They succumbed to sleep in their separate beds, the distance between them both physical and metaphysical, 2 strangers bound by ancient connections neither fully understood. Matthias dreamed for the first time in centuries, not the semi-conscious wanderings of a vampire's dormant mind, but true human dreams, vivid, nonsensical, and filled with emotion. He saw Eliza as she had been, then Catherine as she was now, their images overlapping and separating like reflections in moving water. Behind them, both loomed Anton's shadow, growing larger and more monstrous with each passing moment. He woke with a start to find early afternoon light filtering through the curtains, and Catherine already dressed and watching him from a chair by the window. You called her name in your sleep, she said quietly. Eliza. Matthias sat up, uncomfortable with this vulnerability. I'm sorry. Don't be. I understand better than anyone the complexity of what lies between us. She turned to gaze out the window. I've spent my entire life dreaming of a man I never met in this lifetime. And now that man looks at me, searching for someone I used to be. The simple truth of her statement hung in the air between them. We should get moving, she said, standing abruptly. I've ordered food. You need to eat. Your body remembers how, even if you don't. Edinburgh welcomed them with grey skies and relentless drizzle, weather that matched their grim purpose. They had purchased new clothes and basic supplies on the journey, using cash from the emergency fund Anton kept in the SUV. Catherine observed with amusement as Matthias rediscovered human sensations, the taste of food, the discomfort of rain against skin, the simple pleasure of sunlight. It's like watching a newborn discovering the world, she remarked, as he stood mesmerized by a street musician. Everything is so much more immediate, he explained. As a vampire, sensations were clear but distant, like viewing art through glass. Now the glass is gone. They checked into a small hotel near the university district, using false names. Matthias's apartment was no longer safe. Anton would know of it. Your contact is meeting us here? Catherine asked, arranging their meager belongings in the room. Yes, Margaret Ainsley. Her ancestor was a witch who once helped me track a nest of vampires in 1887. The family has maintained their occult library and connections through generations. Can she be trusted with what we've become, what Anton has become? Matthias's expression darkened. She's pragmatic. The supernatural world operates by different rules of trust. Margaret Ainsley arrived precisely at the appointed hour. She was older than Catherine had expected, perhaps 70, with sharp eyes magnified behind thick glasses and the brisk manner of a retired schoolteacher. So, she said after introductions, you've managed to do what every vampire dreams of and every hunter fears. You've become human again. Her Scottish accent thickened with disapproval. While creating a vampire with triple the normal power. Quite the accomplishment. Matthias accepted her criticism with equanimity. "We didn't intend this outcome, Margaret. Intentions matter little in blood magic," she replied, removing ancient texts from her bag. "Now tell me exactly what happened during the ritual, every detail." They recounted the events at Ravencroft Manor, while Margaret took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions. When they finished, she removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "This is worse than I imagined," she concluded. "Based on your description, Anton hasn't simply absorbed additional immortality. He's undergone a fundamental transformation into something older, what my ancestors would call a primal." "I've never heard of such beings," Matthias said, leaning forward. "Few have. Most were destroyed or went into deep hibernation millennia ago." She opened one of her books, revealing illustrations of monstrous bat-like creatures. They were the first vampires, not made, but born from ancient darkness. Modern vampires are mere dilutions of their power. Catherine studied the illustrations. "If Anton has become this primal, what are his capabilities?" "Limitless strength, immunity to traditional vampire weaknesses, the ability to command lesser vampires telepathically," Margaret's expression was grim, "and hunger beyond comprehension." "How do we stop him?" Matthias asked. "You don't," Margaret replied bluntly. "Not as humans. The primals were eventually contained by an alliance of supernatural beings, witches, werewolves, and yes, even regular vampires, all working together because they recognized a common threat." "We don't have time to form a supernatural coalition," Catherine said. "If Anton recovers and begins feeding, countless will die." Margaret studied them both with calculating eyes. "There is one possibility, though I hesitate to suggest it." She turned to a different section in her book. "The ritual that transformed you was incomplete. It created imbalance rather than harmony. In theory, this state could be reversed." "You're suggesting we become vampires again?" Matthias's voice held equal parts horror and intrigue. "Not exactly. The text speaks of a third state, neither human nor vampire, but something between. A being with the strength and abilities of immortals, but the soul and conscience of humans." Her finger traced ancient script. "The Guardians." Catherine and Matthias exchanged glances. "How would this transformation occur?" Catherine asked. "A second ritual using elements from the first, but it requires something we don't have. Anton's blood." The implication was clear. To obtain Anton's blood, they would need to confront him in their vulnerable human state. "There must be another way," Matthias insisted. Margaret closed her book with finality. "Find me a coven of witches, a pack of werewolves, and a dozen vampire allies in the next 48 hours, and perhaps there will be. Otherwise, this is your only option." After Margaret departed, leaving her books and detailed instructions, silence filled the hotel room. The enormity of what they faced pressed down upon them. "I just regained my humanity," Matthias said finally, his voice hollow. "The thing I sought for centuries, and now I'm considering sacrificing it again." Catherine moved to sit beside him on the edge of the bed. "What if humanity isn't the gift you thought it would be?" she asked softly. "What if your purpose lies somewhere between human and immortal?" He turned to her, studying her face. So like Eliza's, yet uniquely her own. "What about you? You never chose immortality in the first place. Anton took that choice from you." "Perhaps. But these past days as a human have shown me something unexpected." She took his hand, their warmth mingling. "I feel more alien in this body than I did as a vampire. As if my soul recognizes that I've already moved beyond humanity." Their eyes held, understanding passing between them. "If we do this," Matthias said carefully, "we might not be able to return to human form again. And if we don't, countless will die when Anton emerges." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, immortality with purpose seems less a curse than immortality without it." Their decision made, they spent the night studying Margaret's texts, preparing for what would come. The ritual to become guardians required physical preparation as well as magical. Certain herbs consumed, sigils drawn on the skin, incantations memorized. As dawn approached, Catherine paused in her reading. "Matthias, if we don't survive this—" "We will," he interrupted, unwilling to consider alternatives. "If we don't," she persisted, "I want you to know that while I may not remember being Eliza, I understand why she loved you. And she hesitated, searching for words. "I feel something of my own, separate from her memory, something new." The confession hung between them, fragile and precious. Matthias crossed the room to where she sat and knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. "For centuries I searched for Eliza," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But these past days with you have shown me something I didn't expect. It's not Eliza I see when I look at you now. It's Catherine." The kiss that followed was tentative at first, both exploring this new territory of human sensation, then deepening with centuries of longing and days of newfound connection. When they finally separated, both breathless in the literal sense, something had fundamentally shifted between them. "Whatever we become after tonight," Catherine whispered, "we face it together." The abandoned cathedral on Edinburgh's outskirts had stood for 8 centuries, its stone walls absorbing countless prayers, confessions, and now preparations for the occult. Margaret had suggested it as their battleground. Holy ground would weaken Anton somewhat, and the cathedral's remote location meant fewer innocent casualties. They arrived as sunset painted the stained glass windows in bloody hues. Margaret was already there with 2 others, a young man she introduced as her grandson, Daniel, who carried an arsenal of modified weapons, and an older woman named Fiona, who promptly began setting protective wards around the perimeter. "Anton will sense the ritual once we begin," Margaret explained. "The preparations will draw him like a moth to flame." "How can you be certain he's recovered enough to respond?" Matthias asked. "The missing persons reports began last night," Daniel said grimly, checking a crossbow mechanism. 3 disappearances in the highlands near Ravencroft's ruins. The pattern suggests a predator of extraordinary strength. Catherine and Matthias exchanged alarmed glances. "He's recovered faster than we anticipated," Catherine said. "Then we have no time to waste." Margaret directed them to the center of the cathedral, where an intricate pattern had been laid out in salt, herbs, and what appeared to be crushed gemstones. "The ritual to become guardians must begin immediately. When Anton arrives, we'll need to incapacitate him long enough to collect his blood." As darkness fell outside, candlelight illuminated the ancient space. Catherine and Matthias stood at the center of the pattern, their skin marked with the sigils Margaret had insisted upon, symbols of protection and transformation painted in a mixture of ash, sacred oils, and their own blood. Margaret began the incantation, her voice echoing through the cathedral's vaulted ceiling. The words were ancient, older than Latin, older perhaps than recorded language itself. As she spoke, the air grew thick and charged, similar to what they had experienced in Anton's ritual chamber, but somehow cleaner, less corrupted. The pattern beneath their feet began to glow with soft blue light, pulsing in rhythm with the incantation. Matthias felt a strange warmth spreading through his body, starting at the marked sigils and flowing inward. Beside him, Catherine gasped as the same sensation overtook her. "The preparation is complete," Margaret announced. "Now we need the catalyst, Anton's blood." As if summoned by his name, a tremendous crash shook the cathedral as the main doors were ripped from their hinges. Cold wind extinguished half the candles, plunging portions of the vast space into shadow. "How convenient," came a voice that was Anton's, yet not Anton's, deeper, resonating with unnatural harmonics. "You've prepared a welcoming ceremony." The figure that entered moved with liquid grace, despite its monstrous appearance. Anton's handsome features remained partially intact, but his skin had turned ashen grey, stretched over a frame that had grown taller and more gaunt. His fingers extended into claw-like appendages, and when he smiled, Rows of needle-sharp teeth gleamed in the candlelight. "Matthias! Catherine!" He inclined his head in mocking courtesy. "How good of you to save me the trouble of hunting you down individually." Daniel raised his crossbow, but before he could fire, Anton moved with impossible speed. He seized the young man by the throat and tossed him against a stone pillar with casual violence. Fiona began an incantation, her hands weaving complex patterns, but Anton merely laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and made a dismissive gesture. The witch clutched her head and crumpled to the ground, blood seeping from her ears. "Your protections are quaint," Anton told Margaret, who stood her ground at the edge of the ritual space. "Designed for vampires, not for what I have become." "And what exactly have you become, Anton?" Matthias called, drawing the creature's attention away from Margaret. "Something older but not wiser, it seems, still fighting the same battle for relevance." Anton's altered face twisted with rage. "Relevance? I have transcended such petty concerns. I'm power incarnate, the darkness that birthed your kind, distilled and perfected." He moved toward them, but stopped at the edge of the glowing pattern, seeming to assess the barrier it presented. "Interesting. You're attempting the Guardian transformation." His grotesque features formed a smile. "How ambitious, and how futile without my blood." "We're counting on your arrogance to provide that," Catherine said calmly. "Your need to demonstrate your superiority before killing us." Anton laughed again, the sound painful to human ears. "Clever girl. You always were my most promising project." He circled the pattern like a predator assessing prey. "But you've miscalculated. I don't need to enter your little magic circle to destroy you." He raised a clawed hand, and shadows around the cathedral seemed to respond, coalescing into physical form, tendrils of darkness that slithered across the floor toward the protective pattern. Margaret began chanting faster, reinforcing the barrier, but Matthias could see strain on her face. She wouldn't last long against Anton's power. "Catherine," Matthias whispered urgently, "the ritual is incomplete without his blood, but there might be another way. Do you trust me?" Her eyes met his, steady and certain. "With my soul." "Then follow my lead," he said, and to Anton called, "You've become powerful, but fundamentally unchanged. Still the collector, the observer, never the participant." Anton paused, his head tilting at an unnatural angle. "What nonsense are you spouting, Matthias? The soul bond that gave you this power. You've never experienced it yourself. You've only harvested it from others." Matthias extended his hand to Catherine, who took it without hesitation. "You don't understand its true nature." As their hands clasped, the pattern beneath them pulsed brighter. Matthias felt a surge of energy, not coming from outside, but from their connected touch. "The ritual doesn't require your blood," Catherine continued, understanding dawning in her eyes. "It needs the blood of the Trinity. You, me, Matthias, we're bound, whether you acknowledge it or not." She turned to Matthias, raising their joined hands. "Our blood carries traces of yours from the first ritual. The connection was never broken." Anton's confidence faltered visibly. "Impossible. The texts clearly state—" "You mistranslated again," Margaret interjected, her voice strained but triumphant. "The blood bond transcends physical separation. It cannot be broken by distance or transformation." With sudden decisiveness, Matthias drew a small silver blade, one Margaret had provided, and sliced across his and Catherine's already joined palms. Their blood mingled and dripped onto the pattern below. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The pattern exploded with blinding light, and a shockwave of energy knocked Anton backward into a stone pillar. The cathedral trembled, as if caught in an earthquake, stained glass shattering in cascades of color. Matthias felt fire racing through his veins, pain beyond anything his human body had experienced. Beside him, Catherine cried out, but their hands remained locked together, blood continuing to flow and mingle. Through the agony, he sensed something extraordinary happening. his awareness expanding outward and inward simultaneously, his senses sharpening beyond human capacity while his emotions remained vibrantly intact. Anton recovered and launched himself toward them with a howl of rage, but the moment he touched the edge of the now brilliant pattern, his body convulsed. Tendrils of energy, similar to those he had used in his own ritual, erupted from his chest, connecting to both Catherine and Matthias. "What have you done?" he screamed, his voice distorting further as the connection strengthened. Margaret, bloody but conscious, dragged herself forward to complete the incantation. "Balance must be restored," she gasped. Three immortalities shared by three beings, neither human nor vampire, but guardians. Anton struggled frantically against the connection, but the tendrils only tightened, drawing him inexorably into the pattern. As he crossed the boundary, the cathedral's remaining windows shattered in unison. The world dissolved into light and sensation. Matthias felt himself being unmade and remade, molecules disassembling and reforming. Through it all, Catherine's hand remained in his. Their blood mingled, their souls somehow intertwined, yet distinct. When awareness returned, Matthias found himself standing with Catherine at the center of the now darkened pattern. Their joined hands had healed completely, not even scars remaining. Anton lay unconscious at the edge of the circle, his form reverted to something closer to his original vampire appearance. Margaret approached cautiously, supporting herself on a broken piece of pew. "It worked," she said with exhausted wonder. "The balance is restored." Matthias looked down at his hands, feeling the power coursing through them, similar to his vampire strength but tempered, controlled. When he reached out with his senses, he could hear heartbeats throughout the cathedral, smell blood, see perfectly in near darkness. Yet when he looked at Catherine, he felt emotions with human intensity. Love, wonder, hope. "What exactly are we now?" Catherine asked, her voice stronger, more resonant than before. "Guardians," Margaret replied. "Neither human nor vampire, but something new. Immortal, but soul intact. Powerful, but purposeful." She nodded toward Anton's unconscious form. "All three of you." "Anton too?" Matthias asked incredulously. "The ritual required balance. His excess power has been redistributed equally among the Trinity." Margaret's lips twitched in a tired smile. "He'll be quite disappointed when he wakes." As dawn approached, they stood outside the damaged cathedral, watching the first light touch the ancient stones. Unlike vampire skin, theirs did not burn in sunlight, though Matthias could feel a slight sensitivity, like the awareness of heat near a fire. "What now?" Catherine asked, her hand still in his, seemingly reluctant to break that connection. "We have responsibilities," Matthias replied, watching Daniel and Fiona load the still unconscious Anton into a specially prepared vehicle. "Margaret says the guardians of old were protectors, keeping balance between the supernatural and human worlds. A purpose beyond existence itself," Catherine mused. "Something neither of us had before. And Anton will remain under observation until we determine if the transformation affected more than just his power," Margaret interjected, joining them. "The legends suggest guardians cannot harm innocent life. Their nature prevents it. If true, he may find his new existence restrictive." As the sun rose fully over Edinburgh, Matthias turned to Catherine. In the golden light, he could see Eliza in the curve of her cheek, the arch of her brow, but those echoes no longer defined his feelings. This was Catherine, artist, survivor, partner in an extraordinary journey. "I searched for centuries to find Eliza," he said softly. "Instead, I found you." Her smile, uniquely her own, warmed him more than the sunrise. Perhaps that was the point all along, not to reclaim what was lost, but to discover what could be. They turned toward the city below, their enhanced senses detecting both the beauty and darkness it contained. Whatever they had become, these guardian beings poised between humanity and immortality, they faced it together, bound by choice rather than circumstance or ancient magic. Behind them, The damaged cathedral stood as testament to endings and beginnings, its broken windows allowing light to penetrate shadowed corners untouched for centuries, illuminating possibilities previously unimagined.